Breathing is one of the most powerful and immediate ways to influence the vagus nerve because it directly links conscious control with automatic bodily functions. Most of the time, your breathing runs in the background without you thinking about it. But the moment you slow it down or change its pattern, you begin to send signals into the nervous system that can shift your entire internal state. The vagus nerve is closely tied to the relationship between your breath and your heart rate. When you inhale, your heart rate naturally speeds up slightly. When you exhale, it slows down. This rhythm is not random. It's part of how the body maintains balance. By deliberately extending the exhale phase of your breathing, you increase vagal activation, which pushes the body toward a calmer and more regulated state. This has a direct effect on mood. When vagal tone increases, the body reduces the release of stress-related chemicals like adrenaline and cortisol. At the same time, it enhances the activity of systems associated with relaxation and emotional stability. As a result, feelings of anxiety or agitation begin to decrease, and a more grounded, steady state starts to emerge. What's interesting is that this doesn't make you feel sleepy or disengaged. Instead, it creates a state often described as calm alertness. Your body is relaxed, but your mind remains clear and focused. This is the optimal condition for most types of cognitive work, as well as for learning and adapting to new information. The mechanism behind this involves both the brainstem and higher brain areas. The vagus nerve communicates with regions that regulate attention, emotional processing, and decision-making. When you control your breathing, you're not just affecting your lungs or heart, you're influencing these broader networks. That's why something as simple as breathing can change how you think and feel within a short period of time. There's also an important role for consistency and rhythm. Slow, steady breathing patterns, rather than irregular or forced ones, are more effective at activating the vagus nerve. For example, breathing in through the nose and then exhaling slowly through the mouth, with the exhale lasting longer than the inhale, creates a pattern that the nervous system recognizes as safe and stable. Over time, repeating this pattern strengthens the connection between breath control and vagal activation. Another key aspect is awareness. When you focus on your breath, you're also shifting your attention away from scattered or stressful thoughts. This dual effect, physiological and attentional, amplifies the impact. You're calming the body while also organizing the mind, which makes the overall experience more coherent and controlled. With repeated practice, this becomes more automatic. Your nervous system starts to associate slower breathing with a state of regulation, making it easier to access that state even under stress. Instead of being pulled into reactive patterns, you gain a tool that allows you to actively guide your internal state. Over time, this strengthens vagal tone, meaning your system becomes more flexible and efficient at moving between states of stress and calm. That flexibility is what supports better mood, improved focus, and a greater capacity for neuroplasticity, all starting from something as simple and accessible as the way you breathe. Vagal tone reflects how efficiently your nervous system can shift between states of stress and recovery. It's not about eliminating stress entirely, but about how quickly and effectively you can return to a balanced state after a challenge. This ability is central to emotional stability because your mood is tightly linked to how long your body stays activated after a stressor. When vagal tone is low, the nervous system tends to remain in a heightened state for longer periods. Even small stressors can trigger a disproportionate response, and that response lingers. This often shows up as chronic anxiety, irritability, or a baseline sense of tension. The brain and body are essentially stuck in a loop where they keep signaling threat even when none is present. In contrast, high vagal tone allows for rapid recovery. You might still experience stress, but your system doesn't stay there. The vagus nerve helps bring heart rate down, regulate breathing, and reduce the release of stress hormones. This creates a more stable internal environment, where your emotional state is less reactive and more adaptable. This recovery process has a direct impact on mood. When your body returns to baseline quickly, negative emotional states don't have as much time to build momentum. You're less likely to spiral into prolonged chinta or frustration, and more able to reset after disruptions. Over time, this leads to a more consistent and resilient mood profile. There's also a feedback loop between vagal tone and perception. If your nervous system is constantly on edge, the brain becomes more sensitive to potential threats. It starts to interpret neutral or ambiguous situations as negative, which further reinforces stress and low mood. But when vagal tone is strong, the brain interprets the same situations with more neutrality or even positivity, reducing unnecessary emotional strain. Physiologically, this is tied to how the vagus nerve interacts with the heart and other organs. One measure often used is heart rate variability, which reflects the variation in time between heartbeats. Higher variability is associated with better vagal tone and greater flexibility in responding to stress. This flexibility is what allows you to adjust your state based on what the situation actually requires, rather than reacting in a fixed way. Training this system involves repeated exposure to controlled challenges followed by recovery. This could be physical, like exercise, or physiological, like deliberate breathing. Each time you activate your system and then bring it back down, you strengthen the pathways that support regulation. It's similar to building a muscle. The more you use it properly, the more capable it becomes. Another important factor is awareness of your internal state. When you can recognize early signs of stress, such as increased heart rate, shallow breathing, or mental agitation, you can intervene sooner. This prevents the system from escalating and makes recovery easier. The vagus nerve responds well to these early adjustments, especially when they involve slowing the breath or shifting posture. Over time, as vagal tone improves, your baseline state begins to change. You spend less time in high-stress modes and more time in a balanced state that supports both calmness and engagement. This shift doesn't just affect how you feel in isolated moments, it influences your overall pattern of mood, making it more stable, flexible, and aligned with the demands of your environment. Cold exposure is a powerful way to stimulate the vagus nerve because it introduces a controlled stressor that forces your nervous system to adapt in real time. When your body encounters cold, especially suddenly, it triggers a strong physiological response. Heart rate can spike, breathing becomes rapid, and the body prepares to deal with the stress. This initial reaction is driven by the sympathetic nervous system, but what matters most is how you respond to it. If you remain in that reactive state, the experience stays stressful. But if you consciously regulate your breathing and stay still, you begin to recruit the vagus nerve to bring the system back under control. This shift from activation to regulation is where the benefit lies. You are essentially training your nervous system to recover quickly from stress, which directly improves vagal tone. The vagus nerve is particularly responsive to cold exposure in areas like the face and neck. This is due to something called the dive reflex, a built-in mechanism that activates when the face is exposed to cold water. It slows the heart rate and redirects blood flow in a way that conserves energy and promotes calm. Even brief exposure, like splashing cold water on your face or ending a shower with cold water, can activate this response. There's also an effect on alertness. Cold exposure increases the release of norepinephrine, a neurochemical associated with focus and wakefulness. This creates a state where you feel more awake and mentally sharp, but if paired with controlled breathing, it doesn't lead to anxiety or overstimulation. Instead, you get a combination of high alertness and internal control, which is ideal for both performance and learning. Another important aspect is resilience. Each time you expose yourself to cold and manage the response effectively, you reinforce the connection between stress and recovery. The brain learns that stress does not have to lead to loss of control. This changes how future stressors are processed. Situations that might have previously felt overwhelming become more manageable because your system is better trained to regulate itself. There's also a psychological layer to this. Entering a cold environment requires a certain level of willingness and focus. You are deliberately stepping into discomfort, which builds a sense of agency. That sense of control feeds back into the nervous system, supporting vagal activity. The more you experience yourself as capable of handling stress, the less reactive your system becomes overall. Consistency plays a key role here. The benefits of cold exposure are not just from a single experience, but from repeated controlled exposure over time. This allows the nervous system to adapt gradually, improving both the strength and flexibility of vagal responses. Over time, your baseline state becomes more stable, and your ability to shift between activation and calm improves. It's important to approach this in a measured way. The goal is not extreme discomfort, but controlled challenge. Short durations, combined with steady breathing and a calm mindset, are enough to stimulate the vagus nerve effectively. This creates a training effect where your body becomes more efficient at handling stress, improving mood, increasing alertness, and supporting overall nervous system balance. The vagus nerve is deeply involved in social behavior, particularly in how you connect, communicate, and interpret others. It has branches that influence the muscles of the face, the vocal cords, and even how you process social cues like tone of voice and facial expression. This means that your interactions with other people are not just psychological. They are directly shaping your nervous system in real time. When you engage in positive social interaction, especially face-to-face, you activate vagal pathways that promote a sense of safety. Eye contact, subtle facial expressions, and the rhythm of conversation all send signals to the brain that the environment is not threatening. In response, the vagus nerve helps slow the heart rate, regulate breathing, and reduce stress-related activity. This creates a state where you feel more at ease, both physically and mentally. This process is often referred to as social regulation. Instead of managing your internal state entirely on your own, your nervous system is co-regulated through interaction with others. A calm, engaged conversation can shift your physiology without any deliberate effort. You may notice your breathing becoming slower, your muscles relaxing, and your thoughts becoming clearer. These changes are not random. They're being guided by vagal activity. There's also a strong link between this system and mood. When vagal tone increases through social connection, the brain releases chemicals like oxytocin and serotonin, which support feelings of trust, bonding, and well-being. This is one reason why isolation or lack of meaningful interaction can lead to low mood or increased anxiety. Without those signals of safety from others, the nervous system can drift toward a more defensive state. Voice plays a particularly important role. The vagus nerve influences the muscles involved in vocal tone, and at the same time, your brain is highly sensitive to the tone of others. A calm, steady voice can have a regulating effect, while a harsh or erratic tone can trigger stress responses. This is why even a short, supportive conversation can shift your state, while negative interactions can have the opposite effect. There's also a feedback loop between how you feel internally and how you present yourself externally. When your vagal tone is high, your facial expressions, posture, and voice naturally convey calmness and openness. This tends to elicit more positive responses from others, which then reinforces your internal state. On the other hand, when vagal tone is low, your body may signal tension or withdrawal, which can affect how others respond, sometimes reinforcing stress or disconnection. Importantly, this system doesn't require deep or lengthy interactions to be effective. Even brief moments of genuine connection, like a short conversation, shared laughter, or attentive listening, can activate these pathways. What matters is the quality of the interaction, not just the quantity. Over time, regular positive social engagement strengthens the vagus nerve's ability to regulate your internal state. It becomes easier to enter a calm, stable mode, even outside of social settings. This carries over into other areas of life, improving focus, emotional control, and overall resilience. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change its structure and function, is not just driven by effort or repetition. It is strongly influenced by your internal state. The vagus nerve plays a central role in setting that state. When your nervous system is either too stressed or too relaxed, the brain is less effective at forming new connections. The optimal condition for neuroplasticity is a balance between alertness and calm, and that balance is largely regulated by vagal activity. When stress levels are too high, the brain shifts into a defensive mode. In this state, resources are directed toward immediate survival rather than learning or adaptation. Circuits related to fear and threat detection become more active, while those involved in higher-order thinking and memory formation become less efficient. This makes it harder to absorb new information or change existing patterns. On the other end, if your system is too relaxed or disengaged, alertness drops. You may feel calm, but your brain is not sufficiently activated to encode new experiences effectively. Neuroplasticity requires a certain level of arousal, enough to signal that what you're experiencing matters and should be learned. Without that signal, changes in the brain are minimal. The vagus nerve helps regulate this balance by coordinating signals between the brain and body. When vagal tone is strong, your system can enter a state where you are calm but attentive. In this state, stress is low enough not to interfere, but alertness is high enough to support learning. This is where neuroplasticity is most effective. There's also a chemical component to this process. Neurotransmitters like acetylcholine and dopamine play key roles in plasticity, helping to mark experiences as important and worth encoding. The activity of these chemicals is influenced by your overall physiological state, which is shaped in part by vagal input. When your nervous system is regulated, these systems function more efficiently, enhancing your ability to learn and adapt. Attention is another critical factor. The brain changes in response to what you focus on, but sustained attention requires stability in the nervous system. If your internal state is constantly fluctuating due to stress or distraction, your attention becomes fragmented. The vagus nerve supports steadiness, allowing you to maintain focus long enough for meaningful changes to occur in neural circuits. There's also an interaction with memory. For new learning to stick, it needs to be consolidated, a process that often happens during rest and sleep. A well-regulated nervous system supported by healthy vagal function improves both the encoding and consolidation of information. This creates a full cycle where learning is not only acquired, but also retained and integrated. Over time, this means that improving vagal tone doesn't just affect how you feel, it changes how effectively your brain can rewire itself. Skills are learned faster, habits are easier to modify, and mental flexibility increases. Instead of feeling stuck in certain patterns, you gain the capacity to adapt more readily. By creating a stable internal environment through vagal regulation, you're essentially setting the stage for the brain to do what it does best, change in response to experience. This makes neuroplasticity not just a passive property of the brain, but something you can actively support and enhance through how you manage your internal state. Posture and daily habits have a much stronger influence on the vagus nerve than most people realize because the body is constantly sending signals back to the brain about its internal state. The vagus nerve runs through areas like the neck, chest, and abdomen, and the way you hold your body can either support or interfere with how effectively those signals are transmitted. This means your physical position is not just a reflection of how you feel, it's actively shaping it. When you maintain an upright posture, with the chest open and the head balanced rather than tilted forward, you create conditions that allow for smoother breathing and better circulation. This directly supports vagal activity. The diaphragm can move more freely, which improves the quality of each breath, and as a result, enhances the connection between breathing patterns and vagal tone. In contrast, a collapsed posture restricts breathing, increases tension in the neck and shoulders, and can subtly signal stress to the nervous system. This signaling happens continuously. The brain is always interpreting input from the body to determine whether you are in a state of safety or threat. An open, stable posture tends to be associated with safety and readiness, while a closed or tense posture can be interpreted as protective or defensive. These interpretations feed into the vagus nerve, influencing heart rate, mood, and overall regulation. Daily habits amplify this effect because they are repeated over time. Small actions, done consistently, begin to shape your baseline state. For example, how you sit while working, how often you move throughout the day, and whether you take moments to reset your posture all contribute to how your nervous system operates. These are not isolated events. They accumulate and reinforce certain patterns of regulation. Movement is an important part of this. Regular physical activity, even at a moderate level, helps maintain flexibility in the systems controlled by the vagus nerve. It improves circulation, supports breathing efficiency, and reduces chronic tension. This creates an internal environment where the vagus nerve can function more effectively, making it easier to shift between states of activation and calm. Consistency in daily rhythms also plays a role. Going to sleep and waking up at similar times, getting exposure to light early in the day, and maintaining regular eating patterns all help stabilize your internal systems. The vagus nerve is closely tied to these rhythms, particularly through its role in digestion and heart rate regulation. When your daily schedule is erratic, these systems become less predictable, which can reduce vagal tone over time. Another subtle but important factor is how often you check in with your body. Brief moments of awareness, adjusting your posture, taking a deeper breath, relaxing unnecessary tension can act as resets. These small corrections prevent the buildup of stress signals and help maintain a more balanced state throughout the day. Over time, these habits shape your default mode of functioning. Instead of needing to actively regulate your state in response to stress, your body becomes more naturally aligned with calm and alertness. The vagus nerve operates more efficiently, not because of one specific intervention, but because your overall lifestyle is supporting it from multiple angles. This creates a foundation where mood is more stable, focus is easier to maintain, and your capacity for adaptation improves, all emerging from the way you consistently position and care for your body in everyday life. Over time, these small, consistent adjustments in posture and daily habits create a powerful cumulative effect. Instead of relying on occasional techniques to regulate your state, your baseline begins to shift toward greater balance and stability. The vagus nerve becomes more responsive and efficient, allowing you to move more easily between calm and alertness. This is where real change happens, not in isolated moments, but in the patterns you reinforce every day, shaping a nervous system that supports better mood, sharper focus, and a greater capacity to adapt and grow.